joined today by Allan Kelly, Executive Chairman of Miramar Resources M2R. Allan, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Newly listed, but a very, very exciting suite of projects in Kalgoorlie, or near Kalgoorlie.
Yeah, that's right. We listed in October, and the focus was the WA gold exploration. You know, took advantage of the lockdown to sort of sit at home and go through open file data, and obviously being in WA, didn't really want to travel outside of WA, so the focus was see what we could get in terms of good projects in good locations in Western Australia, and keep the story really simple. Yeah.
Why did this project jump out to you?
So our Gidgee project, which is our flagship at the moment, it's 15 k's out of Kalgoorlie. It's on the main road from Kalgoorlie out to Menzies, and if anyone knows Kalgoorlie, you go out past the super pit, you've got the speedway on the right hand side, the 2-up school, and then the next sort of landmark is the Gidgee Roaster, and then that's where we are, where the project straddles the highway, you know, in between the super pit and Paddington, which is operated by Norton. So fantastic location, and then when we started looking at the project, we saw that it was really underexplored despite its location. So there were a couple of obvious targets that stood out to us straight away, and then as we started looking more and more at the data, we got more and more excited about the project. So basically great location and underexplored.
Touching on that, people would assume 15, 20 k's from Cal would be drill holes everywhere, down to bedrock, but this project hasn't had that exploration that everyone would assume it would have been done.
No, and if you look at a map and you just show the drill collars, you look at it and go, okay, that's been really well tested. But what you don't see in that until you look at the data a bit more is that the average hole depth is only about 40 metres. Most of those holes are angled holes, so they're effectively only going down about 30 metres or so. On the entire land package, which is about 15 kilometres from end to end, there's about 10 RC holes, and there's 2 diamond holes. So it hasn't been well explored. I think it was sort of, it's in between, as I said, in between the super pit and Paddington, which is operated by Norton. Historically, Paddington and Panglow and all those deposits were operated by a company called Pancon, which became Goldfields, and then there was a few corporate machinations. So they did a bit of work, and then the ground was dropped. KCGM at the other end, they had the ground for a bit, but that was dropped. So it's like sort of in this no man's land between these two operations, where it just sort of fell through the cracks, I guess.
But given mineralisation throughout the district goes beyond 30 metres, that must be the really exciting bit for you, is getting a drill hole in, being able to systematically drill the area, but also getting some deeper holes in. So
when we looked at it, there were a couple of things that stood out to us. One was the main target that really got me excited was there's a major structure called the Barara Shear, major regional fault. It starts down to the southeast. Horizon Minerals Barara deposit sits on that. It comes up, does this jog on our tenement, and then goes up to Paddington. So that jog was the thing that got me really excited, and when I looked at it, it hadn't been very well explored at all. As we started to look at more and more of the data, we found out that KCGM had actually defined a 300,000 ounce deposit called Runway, which sits immediately south of the tenement boundary, like literally abuts the tenement boundary. It's about 300,000 ounces at about 1 gram, comes right up to the tenement, and then it hasn't been drilled on our side. So that looked pretty interesting. But then started looking at the geophysics and stuff, and it looked like there was a structure that linked Runway with the Barara Shear, so this north-south structure that sort of headed off. So we did our first lot of air core drilling testing that structure. We did 400 by 100, so this is sort of greenfield spaced air core. Average hole depth was still only about, I don't know, sort of 55, 60 metres, but vertical. And at what we now call Marylebone, we've got a 1.5 k long air core anomaly, and the peak value is a couple of metres at 7 grams, including a metre at 13, in a quartz vein that's sitting underneath the paleo channel. When we started looking at that target and comparing it with Paddington, which has produced 4 million ounces, and I think there's a resource there still a resource of about 5 or 6 million ounces, it's got the same geology, the same structure, and it's the same scale, without any effective bedrock testing. So that's pretty exciting. So we've got 4 key targets that we identified from that first phase air core: Marylebone, railway, 8 Mile, which is basically the extension of the runway deposit, and a new thing called Piccadilly, which sort of looks a bit like 8 Mile. And we've just done the next phase of air core, which is sort of 200 by 50, so trying to close it in a bit. And we're now waiting on those results. And if those results confirm what we've got and sort of get a bit better than the previous drilling, then that's time now to go back with the RC rig and drill test it. At the same time, we did a couple of diamond holes testing that extension to runway, and we only stepped out about 60 metres from the tenement boundary, put 2 holes in on one section, and we got visible gold and quartz vein in the same rocks that they see at runway. So, we're waiting on assays for that as well. But so straight away, we've got 4 targets that look like they've got potential to host something of a reasonable size just from the air core. Half the tenement package is still not granted yet. So of that sort of 15-kilometre strike of the Gidgee project, we've got about sort of 6 or 7 Ks that we're working on at the moment. The jog, which was that main target, is actually on application. That's yet to be granted. So, there's a lot to do at Gidgee, and there's a lot to be excited about there as well. So that's our main focus at the moment.
You've built mines.
Yeah.
You've found ore bodies that have turned into mines. What excites you about Miramar?
Well, having ground close to Kalgoorlie is fantastic. If I compare, I guess, the portfolio that we've got in Miramar, say, to Doré. Now, Andy Well was a sort of special case. I'd worked there. I had 20 years of history there. There were some high-grade hits there, but I think probably overall the stuff we've got around Kalgoorlie is probably better than what we had in Doré. We had one good project at Andy Well and a whole heap of sort of greenfield stuff. Gidgee looks great. Our second Eastern Goldfields project is a thing called Glandor. It's about 40 k's east of Kalgoorlie, out near Bulong. We're pretty much surrounded by black cat now. But what's really exciting about that one is you've got this layered mafic package which comes down under the salt lake. And it's a similar sort of rock type to what you see at Kalgoorlie in the Golden Mile and that. But it bends around a granite. So on one side it bends around this granite on the eastern side. Harmony had the project for a bit and did some air core drilling, got some really nice numbers at the bottom of the lake. Followed it up with diamond drilling, got 8 metres at 22 grams in shallow diamond holes. And these diamond holes are only drilled down to about 100 metres or so. So there's a pretty good system on this eastern side of this granite. Anglo Gold Ashanti had it for a little while, did a little bit of work, said it's too small for us, doesn't meet our threshold. So we bought it off them in the IPO for $100,000 cash. So you've got a 2.5 kilometre long zone of mineralisation on this eastern side of this granite. At the southern end of that, there's a line of air core holes which hit things like 9 metres at a gram at the end of the hole. But then there's 800 metres of strike to our tenement boundary that hasn't been tested. And then just off our ground is a historic gold working. So you go, well, it's a pretty straightforward drill target there. But then the probably even more exciting is the mirror image on the western side of the granite hasn't been tested for 2.5 kilometres. Right at the southern end, there's an old line of western mining holes, air core holes. So this is going back to late 80s, early 90s. Similar sort of numbers as on the other side. So say 8 or 9 metres at a gram at the end of the hole, and then no drilling for 2 k's on the lake. So you look at that, geology looks great, structure looks great. There's obviously some gold there. The scale of that looks probably as good, if not better, than Gidgee. So why we hadn't done any work there up to now, when we bought the project off Anglo Gold Ashanti, it's got an Aboriginal heritage site over it. So the way it works in WA, if you buy a project, you can't just transfer the heritage approval, you have to apply for new approval. So we did that basically about the same time as the IPO. So we got that approval in February. So our next drilling campaign, which hopefully is our first one at Glandor. So we want to get Gidgee and Glandor sort of both chugging along, so we're getting lots of good news flow out of Eastern Goldfields. So we're waiting on assays from Gidgee and hopefully we'll be on the ground in Glandor pretty shortly.
Fantastic projects with a lot of upside in well-endowed infrastructure locations in known mining jurisdictions.
Yep.
Plenty of work ahead, but exciting time for shareholders. Alan
Yep.
Kelly, thanks for your time.
Great, thanks a lot.